What's up guys, my name is Will. If you're new to the channel, I am converting the E350Z out there. And so before we get going with today's episode, I want to let you guys know that as of this past Friday, the new merch has dropped and is ready to be purchased on throtl.com. And for this weekend only, there is 2 times entries. So every dollar you spend, you get 2 entries to win that R35 GTR. So let's get going with this episode. You guys saw last week that Mickey, Ricky, and Quinn all pulled the subframe out of the back of this car and were able to start welding and get this really cleaned up back here. So right now I have to pull the motor itself out of the subframe. So the differential itself is locked up, but while the drive unit is open and being serviced, we're actually gonna have them install a limited slip differential inside of that as well. All right, so this subframe is dropped off of the table that it was on so that I can actually get in there, and I needed to undo these axles. And I need to undo 1, 2, you can't really see it, but 2 and 3 rubber isolated mounts for this thing to come out of the subframe and get picked up. Sorry guys. I thought I was recording as we lifted it out of the subframe, dragged the subframe over here. It's down here, and then I just dropped the motor back onto the pallet. So this is what they need us to put it on for them to pick it up. So I'm gonna call them, they're gonna come pick it up. All right, TeslaParts.com is here to pick up this base motor. Differential needs to be serviced, so we're gonna go ahead and help them load this in the truck. He's gonna take it to their guy up in Vista to service that, and then it's gonna be brought back down so we can finally install it inside of there.
1, 2. Oh, whenever you guys are ready. It's just the heavy side.
They gave no, you gave me the motor side. Well, our motor is dropped out of the Z and it is off being serviced. So while we're waiting for that to come back, what I'm gonna go ahead and do now is I'm gonna validate that from the BMS, there's one brake right there and there's another brake here at the bottom of the box. I wanna make sure that from the BMS all the way to the cell tab boards on these modules, that my runs are perfect, 100%. That the right cell is being read to the right pin on the BMS. So I have a module. This is from Orion BMS. And what we're gonna do is each of the 36 pins, I'm gonna plug right here. I'm gonna turn this on and it's gonna tell me that all my cell reads are either correct, they're reading 0, or they're reading the wrong voltage. We're gonna plug in this Orion 2 into this first harness. So this is the most negative of our battery pack through cell 36. So this covers about half of our front box. So we wanna see, when I hit this black button, we wanna see good on all 3 banks. This is the 1 through 12, and this is 13 to 24, 25 through 36. We wanna see good on all 3 of those. And that's what we see. Bank 1 is good, bank 2 is good, bank 3 is good. So that's 1/2 of the front box is wired correctly, and the harnesses between the 2 boxes are pinned correctly. Let's see about our second half. Bank 1 is good, bank 2 is good, bank 3 is good. In fact, you know what? Ricky, can I have a celebratory floss?
Ooh! Why?
Because this thing is all wired correctly. It's a good thing.
Hey!
I need to crimp the final terminations that are going to go to the most positive and the most negative of the battery terminals on this thing. So we have some, this is our most negative. That's going to be directly connected to the rear box. This is going to be our most positive. Out of here, it's going to go to our maintenance switch that is in our armrest in our center console. And I'll get to crimping these 2-aught cables to the legs. down the most negative and the most positive. All of the cell taps are in. We already validated that. All 72 of these cell taps are reading perfectly. This thing is ready to go in. Well, our battery coolant loop needs a overfill tank reservoir, and so I am going to go ahead and start mounting that. We have a cavity just to the left of our front box that is nice and open and accessible when this hood is open, so I'm gonna go ahead and mount that one right there. I've already taken a little bit of aluminum and I've bent and drilled against the mount that's already on this small expansion tank, and I'm gonna go ahead and make sure this is sitting level when it's up against this wall. We're gonna mount it right there, and it's gonna be higher than all of the other hose lines for this coolant loop. It's gonna be the highest point. It's gonna be perfect. There's a lot of extra meat on this thing that I don't really need. I'm gonna round this off so it's not just a, a square, raw looking deal. I'm gonna taper this and then I'll cut across to the full width right here. All right, I went and ground this guy down so it's got a little bit more shape to it. It's not just a rectangular plate that's been bent. Looking pretty good. Just kind of following the edge of that. I've pre-drilled a hole in here at the perfect height for this thing to sit. It is above our other highest point of this coolant system. I'm gonna go ahead and riv nut where this guy is going to sit. Right there, I've already drilled it out for our M6 riv nut. And then it's gonna place this guy in there really nicely. And then again, just this angle, I gotta make sure, I gotta make sure that's perfect to have this sitting level. I am finally happy with that. It is sitting right inside of that cavity, cut around that black bracket. And there is a hole right there that I'm gonna riv nut. And then this is, I'm gonna run up and mount to the bottom of this. Perfect! Well, I finished with the bottom bracket for this thing, so now this expansion tank is fully installed. Cut around that bracket, which is a brace for this whole apparatus going on up here. So I used a welded base that was on this tank, braced it twice against that. Now it's sitting level and ain't going nowhere, especially when there's hoses attached to that. It's gonna be fully taut in there. So there's one expansion tank done for the battery coolant system. Now, I also need to do one for the powertrain in the back, but I'm gonna wait until I have the drive unit back and installed in the subframe. And then we're gonna route all of our hoses and stuff once it's all back installed. All right, so we've acquired a 3-way valve from TeslaParts.com. I need to go ahead and wire this bad boy up with a quick disconnect, a Deutsch pin connector right here. All right, so with the information that I looked up, there are 4 wires coming off of this 3-way valve. You have your 12-volt power, your 12-volt ground, and you have an input. Now this input is either gonna take 12 volts or a ground, and that's gonna actually actuate the 3-way valve to either let this pass straight through or bypass and go up and out this one. And then you have a feedback wire, which is gonna read, I think 9.6 or 2.3, depending on which position the motor is in. So we've hooked up our short leads with our quick disconnect Deutsch connector right there. Again, I just left it so that we can peel back and see the labels for when we need to connect the other side. Make sure, double check that we're putting the right wires to mate. And this guy's ready to mount. This is how the fluid comes into it. Here is the flow of the liquid coming out of this side when you give the switch a positive, and it flows out this way when you give the switch a negative. The battery management system is going to read the thermistors to tell what the cell temps are in our battery pack. And when the temperature is too low, it is going to run it through to our battery heater, which is going to warm the coolant, run that through the batteries and get them up to at least the low end of the happy temperature of the batteries. When the batteries are getting too hot or when we just need to kind of maintain that, we will go ahead and give the negative signal and have this shoot out, and it's going to run through to our radiator. It's going to cool the coolant and bring those batteries back down into less than the high end of the temp, the happy temperature range. So now what I need to do is I need to make a bracket in order to utilize these rib nuts that I have right here. And our in, sorry, it's going to be facing this way, our in to one of our 3/4 inch inlets. Positive is going to switch it through the battery heater. And the battery heater can either be warming or it can be off, and the coolant is just going to flow right through. It's going to basically, it's not bypassing the heater, it's more bypassing the radiator when we don't need to cool the battery. So that 90-degree bracket is what I need to make right now. It's going to be above our lowest point, so we're okay with that. Let's just go ahead and fold some aluminum and cut it down and mount this 3-way bypass valve. Well, now we've got our 3-way radiator bypass valve mounted. It is time to make a mount for this battery heater. So when the battery temperature is below the happy temperature range, it's going to switch to this battery coolant. We have the in, and then this indicator goes out to this hose. So this is just a simple 400 volts when it's on. We do have some thermistor readings to double check the temperature of the coolant before and after.
Hell yeah, Will. Looks f***ing G.
Well, I've got the battery coolant heater installed up here. You guys saw me making the bracket. It is finally installed here, nice and stout. This is the output, and it's going right to the feed of this 3-way valve. So some logic in the battery management system is going to control whether this is on or off. As soon as it senses that the battery cells are too cold to run at an optimal range, it will heat up this coolant and go straight to the battery pack instead of going through the radiator with the help of this 3-way valve. So it's aside from the batteries, that is all of our coolant system components installed. So now we need to drop the battery boxes in and finish all of this 3/4 inch hoses in between everything. All right, so our final 3D printed bezel for the start push button and the gear selection knob has been printed. We actually printed some M6 bolt threads in that top bezel, and that is what is sandwiching those two bezels over this shifter bezel. Problem is, as you can see just from the video here, this contours kind of goes like that, and then as you look at it sideways, it contours. I have a small ring that kind of matches those contour of it. So let's go see how this looks in the car. I am really happy with that. That turned out great. It's great to see it holding itself in. Pretty firm in there. What we're gonna do is we're gonna finish off this seam and most likely kind of blend this into this OEM bezel. We'll take these knobs off, we'll remove this, kind of remove this texture that's been beat up over the years, this kind of honeycomb finish. And we will blend these two together, paint this to match that, and this is gonna look pretty OEM once it's done. Got our GTR push start right here, and this is the 0EV drive neutral reverse shift knob. I've rewired the drive unit for the T2C, and now I have the actual T2C right here. It's gonna basically be the in-between of the 12-volt control relay panel and the drive unit, and then all the stuff in the cabin, gear selection, brake, throttle, everything. And I have the exact placement that I want to tuck this thing in. It's right next to our fuse and relay panel. Let's go ahead and make a real quick adapter plate to mount this thing, and then we'll get this thing mounted. All right, well, we have our mount plate, and the spot I had scoped out for this is right there in that cubby. That is where our wires are coming down from the fuse and relay panel, and that is what some stuff needs to connect to. There was actually a hole that was in the perfect location right there, so I went ahead and put an M5 rib nut right there. Bolt it into place, and I'll go ahead and punch for the last hole right there, and then this will be kicked right there, ready for us to go ahead and start wiring some stuff up to it. I'll probably do one more hole in the center of these, kind of to be just another fastening point. But other than that, we have our location for our T2C, and it's perfect. It's up out of the weather. This is a weather-tight enclosure, but you know, keeping it up tucked high is gonna help even more. So let's go ahead and mount this guy for final, and we'll start wiring this guy. Cool, so there's our T2C fully installed. So there's a nice strain relief P-clamp right here that's gonna keep all these wires from getting pulled out of the pins. It's pinching them right there. And as these get tightened up with all the rest of the cables, this is just a nice short run up to being braced right here. So really steady. This is clear of the rear box. The rear box stops about right here. Well, I kind of held off on explaining this until now because I wanted you guys to take some guesses while I was throwing this together what exactly this is. This is the Mishimoto radiator that we are using for our Tesla drive unit and for the Charger DC-DC. They have the same running temperatures, and so we're throwing them on the same coolant loop. As soon as one of them is getting too warm, a couple of fans that are gonna slide in right here are gonna turn on and start cooling that system down. We sent these off to get water jetted, and they just arrived today, so I pieced them together. They are puzzle pieced together. This should be nice and easy for Evan to weld together. And then this is going to mount on the other side of the subframe. This is the plate that we're gonna mate up against the subframe. And then we're going to go ahead and figure out a way to attach this to the bar that's welded across to brace the frame in the back. Let's go ahead and actually tack it together and throw it in there with some weight on it. Right now I have the subframe ready to be loaded back in without the drive unit so that we can get this radiator mount and fan shroud fit in there and braced against the cross member beam that we have welded in there. This is what we're going to be using on the top end of that fan shroud, and it's going to be mating with this plate right here. So let's go ahead and get this subframe in empty and get this all fixtured and measured out. All right, so I got this thing kind of notched out. There was a little bit of hand tailoring that I had to do just as far as how this steel pipe was fitting up against the new mount. And then you saw me kind of cut out, notch out where this fiberglass rear bumper is. So as this is kind of test fit in here and getting ready to be welded for final strength and final fastening to the subframe, Well guys, that is all we can get done this week in order to get these videos out to you every Sunday. Remember, every Sunday is EV Tesla Sunday here at Throtl, and we're gonna have new episodes for you. Next week when we pick up, this will be welded together. We'll get our fans and radiator in there, and then we're gonna continue working on the battery system, putting in the boxes, getting things buttoned up, and starting to put some heavy stuff inside of this car to get it running by its own power. So thanks for watching today, and remember, every Sunday is Tesla Z Sunday.